Hello, I'm there, ma'am.
Okay. Then Rajeshwari, are you there?
I'm here, ma'am.
Okay, good. Tilini, are you there?
Hello,
Tilini, are
I'm
you there? Okay. Then Rajeshwari, are you there? I think we can start now.
I'm here, ma'am.
Okay, good. Tilini, are you there?
Hi, I'm Kaushalya Parekh.
hello.
I'm going to present
Tilini, are you
the
there?
findings from
Okay.
my master's dissertation.
Then Rajeshwari, are you there? To be introduced. I think we can start now.
I'm here, ma'am.
Okay, good. Tilini, are you there?
Hi, I'm Kaushalya Parekh.
Hello.
I'm going to present
Kaushalya, hold on.
Okay.
Kaushalya, hold on. I'll introduce you and then we'll start.
Rajeshwari, are you there? To be introduced. I think we can start now.
I'm here.
All right. Shall I start then? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. We are about to start this session on English language teaching. It's a fairly long session, so therefore we will have to stick to the time limit very, very strictly. So each presenter will get 10 minutes to do the presentation, followed by 5 minutes of discussion time. And for people who want to ask questions, I would ask you to restrict your questions to short formulations. Don't sort of comment at length. Just ask a very specific question. So the first presentation today is on the theme of storing L2 teacher immunity, nuances of being a sellout by Ms. S.A.S.K. Pereira and Dr. S. Hera. So Kaushalya, you can start.
Shall I play the PowerPoint, sir?
Yeah, you can start. Yes.
Okay.
No. We'll be playing from this end.
Okay.
Yeah, but Kaushalya, you wait.
Okay, ma'am. Shall I play the PowerPoint, sir?
Yeah, you can start. Yes.
Okay.
No. We'll be playing from this
This is
end.
the outline of our
Okay.
presentation.
Yeah, but Kaushalya, you wait.
Okay, ma'am.
With my experience of working with ESL teachers in various types of institutions, it has
Shall
been
I
my
play the
observation
PowerPoint, sir?
that ESL teachers
Yeah, you can
differ
start.
from
Yes.
one another.
No.
in
We'll
terms
be
of
playing
their
from this end.
motivation, commitment,
Okay.
as well as
Yeah, but
attitudes
Kaushalya, you
towards
wait.
teaching.
Okay,
If
ma'am.
these teachers were placed on a continuum to indicate the extent of their motivation for professional development, it has
Shall
been
I
my
play the
observation
PowerPoint, sir?
that ESL
Yeah, you
teachers
can
differ
start.
from
Yes.
one another
No.
in
We'll
terms
be
of
playing
their
from this end.
motivation, commitment, as well as
Yeah, but
attitudes
Kaushalya, you
towards
wait.
teaching.
Okay,
If
ma'am.
these teachers were placed on a continuum to indicate the extent of their motivation for professional development, it has
Shall I
been my
play the
observation
PowerPoint, sir?
that ESL
Yeah, you
teachers
can
differ
start.
from
Yes.
one another
No.
in
We'll
terms
be
of
playing
their
from this end.
motivation, keeping the as well as
Yeah, but
attitudes
Kaushalya, you
towards
wait.
teaching.
Okay,
If
ma'am.
these teachers were placed on a continuum to indicate the extent of their motivation for professional development, it has
Shall I
been
play
my
the
observation
PowerPoint, sir?
that ESL
Yeah, you
teachers
can
differ
start.
from
Yes.
one another
No.
in
We'll
terms
be
of
playing
their
from this end.
motivation, keeping the principles
Yeah,
and
but
ways
Kaushalya, you
towards
wait.
teaching.
Okay,
If
ma'am.
these teachers were placed on a continuum to indicate the extent of their motivation for professional development, it has
Shall I
been
play
my
the
observation
PowerPoint, sir?
that ESL
Yeah, you
teachers
can
differ
start.
from
Yes.
one another
No.
in
We'll
terms
be
of
playing
their
from this end.
motivation, keeping the principles and
Yeah, but
ways
Kaushalya, you
towards
wait.
teaching.
Okay,
If
ma'am.
these teachers were placed on a continuum to indicate the extent of their motivation for professional development, it has
Shall I
been
play
my
the
observation
PowerPoint, sir?
that ESL
Yeah, you
teachers
can
differ
start.
from
Yes.
one another
No.
in
We'll
terms
be
of
playing
their
from this end.
motivation, keeping as well as
Yeah, but
attitudes
Kaushalya, you
towards
wait.
teaching.
Okay,
If
ma'am.
these teachers were placed on a following to indicate the extent of their motivation for professional development, it has
Shall I
been
play
my
the
observation
PowerPoint, sir?
that ESL
Yeah, you can
teachers
start.
differ from one another
No.
in
We'll
terms
be
of
playing
their
from.
Okay, I think there was a technical difficulty and the audio was not clear. Is being rectified now. Just hold on a moment.
Hi, I'm Kaushalya Pereira. I'm going to present select findings from my master's. This is the outline of our presentation. With my experience of working with ESL teachers in various types of institutions, it has been my observation that ESL teachers differ from one another in terms of their motivation, commitment, as well as attitudes towards teaching. If these teachers were placed on a continuum to indicate the extent of their motivation for professional development, at one end of the continuum will be those who are keen on acquiring new knowledge related to their field, seeking principled and informed solutions to problems they encounter in the teaching learning process, and applying this knowledge in their context as appropriate. At the other end of the continuum will be those who are content with doing the bare minimum of being in class and keeping the students in order during the allotted time slots. An important question that springs from this observation is as to why this type of disparity exists among recent empirical literature on teacher personality and teacher development testify that individual teachers differ from one another in terms of their motivations, commitment, as well as attitudes towards teaching and their own professional development. Studies on teacher motivation relate the concept to a variety of factors such as teacher stress, classroom classroom affectivity, burnout, vulnerability, resilience, and openness to change. In his pioneering study on the construct of second language teacher immunity, Hiver provides a theory as to why the professional development and identity formation of teachers might follow diverse trajectories in terms of motivational dimensions. According to Hiver, second language teachers' constant encounters with challenging or traumatic experiences at work result in the development of a psychological construct which supports their survival in the career. This construct is termed second language teacher immunity, metaphorizing the concept of biological immunity. Second language teacher immunity is defined as a line of defense to the demands placed on teachers and the often traumatic experiences they encounter that result in emotional exhaustion and burnout. This immunity can take either a productive or maladaptive turn, resulting in a corroborating teacher identity. Hiver identifies several teacher types, such as the visionary and the spark plug, who are productively immunized, and the sellout and the fossilized, who are maladaptively immunized. Today, I am reporting on select findings from a larger narrative case study on the development of second language teacher immunity in the Sri Lankan government school context. The research approach was narrative inquiry, which allowed us co-construct, together with the participants, a storied understanding of the nuances of second language teacher immunity. Our key research question was as to how second language teacher immunity manifests itself in a teacher belonging to the maladaptive teacher type known as sellout experience of a teacher of English in the context of the Sri Lankan government school system. 10 teachers from 7 schools in the Western province selected through convenience sampling informed the larger study. The present study is on one of those participants selected through purposive sampling. Participant inclusion criteria in the larger study were being in-service teachers with a minimum of 10 years of experience working in Sri Lankan government schools on permanent basis and not being on long-term leave at the time of data generation. The key data generation tool was a semi-structured interview schedule which elicited the life history narrative of the participant's career development from a novice to a veteran. Participants were asked to assign themselves a pseudonym to ensure anonymity and confidentiality of data. Measures were also taken to avoid recording any other information that would be likely to reveal the identity of the participants. When analyzing the data, each participant's career history was constructed in a temporal sequence. A thematic analytical approach was adopted, and both theory-driven and data-driven codes were used. The characteristics of a sellout described by Hiver can be summarized under 3 key points: selecting teaching as a career out of self-interest, indifference towards the profession, and not valuing teaching as a rewarding career. Our participant, Imali, manifests all key characteristics of a sellout. I would like to quote certain parts from her narrative which provide evidence. It is apparent that she has selected teaching as a career out of self-interest. I quote, "Actually, I became a teacher accidentally. I was getting trained in the healthcare sector. I was working at a hospital, and to get rid of that pain, I sat the teacher's recruitment exam and got through." End of quotes. Self-interest was a crucial drive behind Imali's career persistence as well. I quote, "I'm a bit of an outgoing character, so I was not much happy with the job. But my children were small, only a walking distance to here. I can reach home early. So I think that's why I'm still here." End of quotes. It is also evident that she had an indifferent attitude towards the profession. On being asked how she would respond to a situation in which a young student who is quite good at studies finds it difficult to pay attention to her lesson, she mentions that she would give an order to sit in the place and do the job, punish him or shout at him, or by force he should be made to sit. This shows that Imali would not make an effort to look for creative strategies that would address the problem at hand. Rather, she would steer ahead on cruise control. Apparently, Imali also does not value teaching as a rewarding career. I quote, "I think teaching is a sort of job which we don't have much interest in. I feel there are a lot of jobs you can enjoy. You get a lot of facilities. You get the freedom, money, everything is there. Here it's different." End of quotes. Imali's narrative reflects the accumulative frustration she has been experiencing as a teacher because of being unable to achieve goals that resonate with her personality. Maslach and later delineate a similar type of phenomenon in a vivid manner. You feel frustrated because you are blocked from achieving your goals. You cannot overcome the obstacles in your path either because you lack sufficient resources or you lack control over the work. Not surprisingly, you feel ineffective, but you also feel exhausted as a result of wasted time and effort. Although Imali manifests characteristics of the maladaptively immunized teacher type sellout, it is interesting to note that the characterization does not fit her in certain aspects. For example, despite her cynicism towards students and absence of an emotional bond with the career, she states that the sole source of her career satisfaction is teaching children. I quote, "Importance of being a teacher means only the satisfaction of teaching the children, because some of them really need the help of the teacher to improve themselves, get through their exams, and sometimes we can share the knowledge with them, nothing else." End of quotes. She is also sensitive to the needs of the students in certain aspects. She says, "I think the teachers should change their attitude first because now the society has changed, no? The children are expecting a little bit of different things. There is a problem in the system too because the syllabus, the exam methods have to be changed." End of quotes. Although similar critiques of the education system are voiced by the other participants of the larger study, what sets Imali apart from productively immunized participants is the state of having been given up caring altogether, as Hiver terms it. To conclude, Trajectories of second language teacher immunity is a premise yet to be explored in depth in the Sri Lankan context. Therefore, our expectation is that this study would help broaden the current understanding of teacher motivation and teacher personality development from the theoretical lens of second language teacher immunity. It would be worthwhile to conduct in-depth studies on individual teachers' narratives of becoming teachers so as to develop an understanding of diverse teacher identities and the dynamics that influence their development. As the findings of this study showed, manifestation of second language teacher immunity in terms of productive or maladaptive teacher types could be much more complex than that portrayed by Hiver in his pioneering study. Therefore, it will be of interest to conduct further in-depth exploration of nuances of teacher types in terms of their second language teacher immunity. It is expected that such studies would help identify tendencies in teachers to develop maladaptive immunity at early career stages so that remedial measures could be adopted in a timely manner. These were our references for this presentation. Thank you, and it's time for Q&A.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pereira, for that fascinating presentation on teacher identity and immunity. We can take questions or comments now. Yes, Mihri, you can go ahead.
Thank you for a really interesting presentation. I think this is the kind of thing we need to really look at. In terms of the term sellout, I think you're using Heber's definition. Do you think that term really works for this person? Is there a better kind of label that you can use, or something a little less negative maybe?
Actually, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Actually, now, if I talk about the larger study that I did, there are cases where whereas teacher types do. There are cases or participants who do not fit the teacher, the characteristics of the teacher, a particular teacher type that he gives us. There are teachers who do not fit into a certain teacher type identified by Hiver, but this teacher actually fits the characteristics portrayed by Hiver as the teacher type sellout. So it can be like sound negative, but in a way, I think when we take the two global types of teacher immunity, that is maladaptive and productive, we can say that this teacher fits more into this teacher type, into a maladaptive teacher type, because her immunity has been developed in such a way that she does not value teaching as a career. So anyway, there are disparities, like she says that teaching, the satisfaction of the profession is only teaching the children. So there are disparities, but she fits into this character portrayal of a sellout by Hiver to a great extent.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Pereira. Yeah, I think Dr. Ruandika Pereira has another question. I think that will have to be the last question for this.
Yes, okay, thank you. Actually, it's really a fascinating presentation. So I just want to ask whether you have mentioned that you have used the method thematic analysis. So initially, how many themes have you identified? Could you please let me know if
actually, in terms of themes, I used...
You can remember. And what are those?
The themes means, actually, I used two types of codes to arrive at the themes. So one was the data-driven ones, and the others were the ones that I got from HeWare study. So those two types were the main ones.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Pereira. And because we are running behind schedule, we'll have to move on to the next paper. So may I invite Ms. Rajeshwari Iyer to talk about the use of communication strategies in a multilingual urban workplace in Sri Lanka. Over to you, Rajeshwari.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so shall I play the presentation or is it going to be played?
It's going to be played, Raji. You'll join the Q&A.
Okay. Rajeshwari Iyer. The topic of my presentation is use of communication strategies in multilingual urban workplace in Sri Lanka. Imagine a workplace in a cosmopolitan city like Colombo. Do you think the sentences you see on screen are common or uncommon? Well, in my research context, these type of sentences were very common. Participants in my research used these sentences quite frequently. This is the this type of language behavior is what my research. Now let's look at the simple outline. We will be looking at the key concepts of literature and the research questions, how the research was conducted, and examples of actual language use in the research site. A look at a little bit of statistics. Did you know that 20% of youth are in the workforce? Of those 20%, 25% lives in urban areas, of which one-third is in the western province. Of the one-third, 40% of the youth are in service sector and 90% of our youth are literate. To add to that, 90% of employers expect English language skill from their employees. However, only 12% of the workforce get post-graduation training. Does this paint a bleak picture in terms of communication? Do we fail in business transactions? Does everyone speak English? What is the role of Sinhala or Tamil in workplace? Does everybody speak all three languages? If they do they speak it in the same fluency? These are the foundation. These questions are the foundation for my South Asian countries, especially Sri Lanka, is a multicultural, multilingual and multi-ethnic country. For South Asians, according to Kanagaraja and Wood, multilingualism is not based on shared language or culture, but it's based on shared space. When people meet those who speak other languages, they don't expect them to speak their language, or even if they speak, they don't expect them to speak in perfect grammar. Everybody accepts and understands in a non-judgmental way that language inaccuracies occur and they are ready to adapt and accommodate to each other's linguistic behavior. To develop competence, socio-cultural theory says, which is proposed by Vygotsky and developed by Lantoff, Thorne and Forner, states that human cognitive activity develops through interaction with social and material environment. The material environment being family, peers, institutions, or workplace. They emphasize on day-to-day interaction in developing linguistic competence, using higher order artifacts like language, numeracy, categorization, rationality, and logic. If one develops linguistic competence, they should be able to communication accommodation theory, developed by Giles, Oge, and Galois, focuses on what happens when people actually communicate. They say speakers initiate interaction with initial orientation about the intergroup, interpersonal, and social historical context. To adjust communication behavior based on the behavioral tactics, perceptions, and attributions towards the speaker by accommodating, non-accommodating, or diverging in their conversation. There is a continuous evaluation of the content and the speaker which guides the future interactions. So it's accepted that we need linguistic competence to communicate. But people do get into trouble when they talk to each other. Interactional perspectives of communication strategies proposed by Droney and Scott suggest that people use communication strategies as problem-solving mechanisms. They categorize these mechanisms into three main categories: direct, indirect, and international communication strategies. This research site showed examples of all these strategies being used. To go further into the research, these are the two research questions that were designed to find answers. The first one is, what are the communication strategies used by multilingual employees and how these strategies are being used? Answers for this research question: a multi-sited exploratory case study employing quantitative and ethnographic tools was designed. These are the data collection tools. The first and the mostly used tool is field observation as an observer participant. The data collected was analyzed using qualitative data analysis software STI. Then demographic information, communication strategy use perception, and presence of multilingualism at home and at work was gathered through a questionnaire, and the data was coded using Microsoft Excel. Finally, 4 semi-structured interviews were conducted by purposive sampling, and that data was coded manually. All the information was taken in, analyzed, triangulated in a thematic way with a bottom-up inductive approach. While in the analysis, it was noticed that use of direct, indirect, and international communication strategies were very common. In direct communication strategies, code switching was the most commonly used. Now we'll be looking at an example of situational metaphorical code switching in one single conversation. This is a lengthy conversation between a mother, father, and a child and a staff in one of the branches. In this situation, the child was always spoken to in English, but the parents spoke to each other in Tamil or Sinhala. Even though the mother was competent in English, she used it only with the child and sometimes with the staff, not with her husband. The staff followed whichever language the customer used, either English or Sinhala. It looked like when the parents talked to each other, they used the V code, Tamil or Sinhala, and when they spoke to the staff, they used they code, Sinhala or English. However, why the child was only spoken to English could be based on the socio-economic factors. So, situational code switching could be seen when the parents were talking to the staff and with each other. If we look at metaphorical code switching, there was one instance when the mother was talking to the child. She mixed a Sinhala or Tamil word amma, which indicates intimacy or show of love, with an English sentence, inside an English sentence. This shows that code switching, metaphorical code switching in a single conversation. If we look at interactional code switching, both accommodating and non-accommodating switching happen in the research site. The first example, even though it's a single sentence, the situation how it happened is very interesting. In one of the branches, the customer walked in, smiling and greeting the staff. They started speaking in English. And the staff wanted to know if he needed any adjustments in his brain. Since the customer didn't understand the word adjustment, we said adjustments piano. Immediately, the staff switched to Sinhala and started demonstrating what adjustments meant by using a frame. So here we could witness a combination of strategies. Initially, the staff accommodated to the customer's language, which started speaking to him. When the customer exhibited inability to understand, she re-accommodated, switching to Sinhala, and what's more, she managed to keep the conversation going with demonstration of the actual product. So here we can see that not one but multiple combination strategies are used in combination to avoid communication gap. A similar example is also given at the bottom here. The staff who was having visible difficulties in using English continuously started speaking in simple words or phrases with a customer who was very fluent in English. The daughter, who understood his difficulty, immediately changed her style of language and started speaking in one word or phrases to him. In both cases, we can see that accommodation helped in maintaining the communication. Non-accommodation is the from me as a researcher. I was visiting another branch, which is predominantly Tamil spoken, and when I entered, the staff there greeted and asked me if I would like to have some tea. Instinctively, I replied in English. In retrospect, what I believe is my non-accommodative behavior indicates that I wanted to maintain my status as a researcher and as a foreigner in that situation to continue my research process. Even though she was the only person who spoke to me in Tamil during the entire data collection process. Finally, the indirect strategies. Here, direct appeal for help was used to gain time. It is again me and another staff speaking to each other. I knew that she was a new staff, but she was not wearing her uniform. When I questioned that, she wanted to express that she has the uniform, but the blouse is not ready. But she wasn't able to frame that sentence, so she used an expression, which feels like a direct appeal for help, but within that time, she managed to construct a sentence using different words to say that the team is not ready to wear it. Here, even though a direct appeal for help is used, it was used to gain time. This is an example for indirect strategy use. Overall, when we look at the direct, international, indirect strategies, these are the most commonly and least commonly used strategies. The staff were not interested in imitating foreigners, or they were not ready to give irrelevant information or totally give up communication. The effort was always to continue and complete the communication. To look at the answers for the research questions, yes, communication strategies were used among multilingual users. Both all direct, international, indirect strategies were used in all the branches, and also the strategies were used clearly with the delineation of personal and professional communication, and the prominence was given to the message, not language. Staff, customers, and participants in the research used the combination of strategies to continue a conversation by either accommodating or non-accommodating to the interview. In terms of pedagogical implications, by designing industry-specific material and implementing communicative language teaching by creating awareness of strategy use, will really help the students in the workforce to get better in their language. If authentic material can be used, that would definitely help them to improve language necessary for their profession. Testing, instead of using traditional testing, if testing can be incorporated into their work and if performance can be assessed at work and rewarded accordingly, at least in the beginning of the career, the participants would benefit greatly from it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Saya. So we can move on to the Q&A now. Rajeswari, your mic is off, I think.
No, it's on, sir.
Yeah.
I hope you can.
So anybody who has a question or a comment? No one wishes to raise a question or a query? Okay, if no one is raising any issues, I'll just ask one thing. So Rajeswari, in the interactional use of this kind of mixed code, at any point, I don't know whether that was a focus of your study, but did you look at like power relations, like who was more comfortable in using a mixed code and in what ways? Because there is, I mean, some people are more comfortable in using it, others are much more self-aware. So
Yeah. Yes, sir. I mean, when I visited the branches, I was able to notice that certain sector of the population, they mixed code or spoke mostly in English. They were probably from the affluent society, and even within the different sections of the same branch. Say, for example, when people buy frames, they mixed Sinhala, Tamil, and English more. But when they were buying contact lenses, most of them spoke purely in English. So there is kind of power relation between the the strata of the society and the type of products they were buying also. That's one aspect I noticed. Yes.
that's interesting. Thank you. Does anyone else have a comment or a question? If not, we can move on to the next presenter. Okay, it looks like no one has a question. So thank you very much, Rajeswari. We will move on to the next presentation, which is on second language, bridge or barrier, exploring the linguistic identities of novice international school English teachers in Sri Lanka by WDM Gunatilaka and Dr. Srimadi Hela.
Greetings, everybody. This study looks at the perceived linguistic identities of novice international school English teachers. It discusses whether their second language English acts as a barrier for relationship building or whether it acts as a bridge that connects and builds trust between the students and the teachers. Here's a brief outline of the presentation. Despite the dearth of research based on the international schools in Sri Lanka, we can't underestimate their significance in the Sri Lankan education system. So following the increasing popularity of these schools and the notion of the high quality of the education provided by certain international schools, a large number of graduates seek career opportunities there. So that's where the motivation for this study comes from. I will draw your attention to one of the recent definitions of language teacher identities, which provided the basis for this study. Language teacher identities are doing, feeling and imagining and storing. They are contested and resisted by self and others. They are accepted, acknowledged and valued by self and others. They are dynamic, multiple and hybrid. Moving on to the methodology. This is a qualitative case study. A qualitative approach sheds light on how novice teachers interpret their experiences by collecting highly subjective data. The case study approach helps to capture the contextual and ungeneralizable data of this research. The participants selected for this study are 4 international school English teachers with less than 2 years of experience. They are graduates from government universities and they have no teacher experience. or training. The data collection was carried out using semi-structured interviews, and the data was analyzed using the thematic approach. Moving on to the discussion, does English as a second language play the role of a barrier in the international school context? When we try to answer this question, we cannot forget about the multiple and hybrid identities that the novice teachers bring to the international school as they begin their career. So I'm focusing only on the linguistic aspect of the identities here. The novice teachers see themselves as bilinguals who speak Sinhala as their first language or the mother tongue and English as their second language. They are former students of local schools where the medium of instruction has been Sinhala. They see themselves as non-native speakers of English. They are graduates of government universities, and they find themselves more comfortable in communicating in Sinhala within the family, society, and the a circle of close friends. And they see themselves as English language learners. So for these teachers, the first language or Sinhala facilitates expression of emotions and feelings more eloquently, creates bonds, brings out humor, and helps feel more at ease during interactions. So these ideas are confirmed by their utterances. For instance, one of them say, I feel more at home talking in Sinhala, or I feel more comfortable if I can switch to Sinhala during intimate conversations. On the contrary, English for them is acquired through formal education. It stands for formality, and they see that English is a language that needs to be learned. And yeah, if we pay attention to their utterances, one of them said, I find it hard to reach out to the other person in English. Or the essence of a joke would not come if you talk in English. So as the teachers perceive, when the rules of the educational institute makes it necessary to maintain English-only communication, a barrier is created against a close student-teacher relationship. So the rapport necessary for building a favorable environment for learning and teaching is affected by this language barrier. And we found that it is also ironic how the linked language English plays the role of a barrier language in the context of international schools. Research has also emphasized the role of the first language in creating close bonds and shown the necessity of communicating in the first language with the students. Okay. Earlier we discussed how the first language facilitates to reach out to the students easily. But here, attention is created. As seen by the new teachers, the students expect the English teachers to communicate only in English. And also, it is believed that the image of a good English teacher relies much on the ability to communicate fluently in English. So if you look at these utterances by the new teachers, that idea is confirmed. For instance, one says English helps to create a good image of the teacher. Language, children spot your errors quite easily and quite often. So if we make errors, they tend to mock our language, and also that leads to losing their trust in us. So as perceived by the novice English teacher, Her reputation depends much on the fluency and the accuracy demonstrated by her. So for her, it indirectly impacts on whether she is accepted as a competent English teacher by the students. But being speakers of English as a second language and having to, live up to the high standards where they are expected to speak flawless and fluent language results in language anxiety. And this concern appears to be particularly related to new English teachers. According to one of the participants, a teacher who has already established her identity as an English teacher in the international school may switch to L1 occasionally without losing the student trust in her English competency. So that brings us to the conclusions of the study. The novice English teacher anxieties emerge as their existing linguistic identities clash with their new role. Novice teachers negotiate their existing identities to build a teacher identity that is accepted, acknowledged, and valued by self and others, and also completely ignoring and disregarding the linguistic identities of the teachers of international schools can have a negative impact on the student-teacher rapport. Accordingly, the recommendations of this study are that it is necessary to take the linguistic identities of the teachers into consideration when setting up rules in educational institutes that promote English-only communication. And also, the teacher educators, principals should initiate ways to help novice teachers to overcome their anxieties related to their linguistic identities. So here are the references used for this study. So that is the end of our presentation. Thank you for listening, and we'd be happy to answer any of the questions that you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tilini, for that fascinating study into the problems faced by novice teachers, particularly in international school settings. So again, this is open for questions and comments.
May I ask a question?
Yes, Viv, go ahead.
So I think I missed a little bit. Maybe you mentioned this before, but how many teachers and what was the gender breakdown?
Actually, ma'am, I selected 4 teachers.
Okay.
And initially, there was no particular plan regarding the gender, but all of them were female teachers.
All right. Okay. I thought it was more, and then there was some kind of a pattern with gender, because there's a lot of research done with language and L2 and gender. So that's fine. Yeah. I found it very interesting that they once they are comfortable and they have established their identity, only that they feel comfortable to switch to L1. That's very interesting, actually. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tilini, I had a quick question as well, whether you spoke to the management at any point regarding this issue, particularly with the insights the study has generated and what their reactions was.
Not really. No, I haven't spoken to them. Yeah.
I actually have a comment as well. It's really, I mean, I love your study, but I think one of the things that you raised as your recommendations about English-only policies, I think it should go beyond even the teacher's linguistic identity. I think this is a question we should be discussing anyway, of how ethical it is to have an English-only policy in a Sri Lankan school. So I think we have to take, you can extend that a little further in terms of problematizing. It's not only about the teacher's linguistic identity, but also the student's linguistic identity and our identity as Sri Lankans, I think. Just a comment, really.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank
You
you,
for actually giving that space for me to raise that comment.
Yeah, I think this paper raises a number of questions that we can discuss, because I remember an anecdote my father used to share, because he studied during the colonial era, and the Sinhala teacher would speak for 10 minutes in English before starting the Sinhala lesson, because he wanted to establish his English fluency. So it's kind of very ironic that in 2020 we are seeing the same in local schools. Anyway, I think in the interest of time, we have to move on to the next presentation. So thank you very much, Tilini.
Thank you very much, sir.
So the next presentation is by Ms. F.S. Wazir on a study of the effectiveness of language games as a grammar retention strategy for ESL learners.
Good afternoon, everyone. The focus of my presentation today would be on a study on the effectiveness of language games as a grammar retention strategy for ESL learners. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Shazbin Wazir. This is the scope of my presentation. To begin with, according to Hammer 1991, if language structure makes up the skeleton of language, then it is vocabulary that provides the vital organs and flesh. Therefore, vocabulary is identified as the foundation of language learning, in which grammar is closely associated. And 2003 further claims that as far as language instruction is concerned, both teachers and learners are in the view that grammar is boring. However, in looking for ways to involve students in active learning, where the students are encouraged to engage in meaningful interaction, is by using games. Therefore, games can be defined as an activity with rules, a goal, and an element of fun. The current research investigated answers for the following research questions. What impact do language games have on grammar retention, and is using language games more effective than using traditional methods in grammar retention? When moving to the literature review, Odell 1997 recognizes memory as crucial in vocabulary learning, and the benefits of revision and repetition have been clearly demonstrated in studies of vocabulary learning. Nation 1990 further reveals, through his research on vocabulary acquisition, the requirement of students to be exposed to a new word a minimum of 5 to 6 times before actually learning it. Thus, these studies identify repetition as a means of learning and retaining new words, and language games as a mode of achieving it. When moving on to game-based learning, it has been defined as one of the ways in which learner-centered pedagogy can be implemented in the classroom in order to engage and motivate learners. Further, according to Kirmurje 2004, young learners need fast, active, and exploratory activities. Further, he states that thus not the traditional school-based learning, but game-based learning, which has the motivational power to meet the needs of the learners. These studies identify games as providing many advantages in the ESL classroom than an element of fun. One of the major areas mentioned in the literature to incorporate games is when teaching grammar to young learners. Further, young learners are not able to pay their attention for more than 10 to 20 minutes, and after that they start to be bored and tired, which is true in grammar acquisition since learning depends on rules and memorization. However, as opposed to Andrew 2003, Mataz and Taru highlighted that the students felt motivated when engaging in different grammar games, and most importantly, they did not consider the classroom atmosphere and learning as boring or stressful. By taking all these findings into consideration, the purpose of this study was to evaluate the effectiveness of game-based approach against the traditional teaching method in retaining grammar for ESL learners in the Sri Lankan context. When moving on to the methodology, in the attempt to draw conclusions, purposive sampling method was used in this study, given that the participants of this study were 90 grade 6 students of a leading boys' school in Gaul, of whose both first language and medium of instructions are Sinhala. Further, it is important to note that students of grade 6 are particularly chosen in this study as the focus grammatical aspect, which was irregular past tense, is introduced to the local syllabus in the chosen level. Then 3 classes of the same grade were randomly selected with 30 students each as the experimental group and the control groups after conducting a pretest to ensure that they have little or no knowledge on irregular past tense. The research design depended on the statistical analysis of the data which were collected during 2 periods, and then just after the lesson being taught, the students were given worksheet 1, and during the delayed retention stage during the second week, worksheet 2 was given, and during the fourth week, worksheet 1 was repeated again to test grammar retention. The study used a mixed methods research approach. When analyzing the quantitative data that were collected through a comparison of 3 test results which were conducted just after the lesson being taught at the immediate retention stage and in the second and fourth week since the lesson being taught at the delayed retention stage, RStudio was used with special focus on the t-test so as to help the researcher in identifying how the teaching methods have influenced in the test scores in the sample groups. Further, the observed data were analyzed in detail using the coding process with regard to the experiment and engagement of the students in the two settings. When moving on to the data analysis, the t-test analysis was one of the key calculation methods used in the current study by the researcher to analyze the means of the groups to understand whether there is a significant difference between them. And given on the slide are the hypotheses of the study. As indicated, during the second week, which is at the delayed retention stage, the mean difference between the two control groups and the experimental group are more significant than the performances at the immediate retention stage. Accordingly, it is evident that the students in the experimental group have outperformed students in the control group 1 as expected by the hypothesis. However, when considering the mean scores across the 3 tests, week 1, 2, and 4, for the 3 groups, experimental group, control group 1, and control group 2, show that the group receiving game-based approach has a higher mean in all 3 weeks compared to the 2 control groups during the immediate retention stage and delayed retention stage. This is consistent with the alternative hypothesis that the 2 teaching methods have different influences on grammar retention, thus providing the answer for the research question that there is an impact of language games in grammar retention for ESL learners in the Sri Lankan context. However, when considering the mean scores across the 3 tests, week 1, 2, and 4, for all 3 groups, show that the group receiving game-based approach has a higher mean score in all 3 weeks compared to the 2 control groups during the immediate retention stage and delayed retention stage. This is consistent with the alternative hypothesis that the 2 teaching methods have different influences on grammar retention, thus providing the answer for the research question that there is an impact of language games in grammar retention for ESL learners in the Sri Lankan context. Apart from the statistical analysis, the researcher also observed the classroom since quantitative data are incomplete at recognizing behavioral factors. Given that under behavioral engagement, the observation notes were based on traits as Collins 2014 recognized, effort, taking initiative, following rules, and positive interaction with teacher and peers, given that it was evident how the students of the experimental group were listening attentively to the teacher and were very keen in learning irregular past tense. They even volunteered in answering the questions by raising their hands. It was also evident how the students talked more. Nevertheless, when considering the 2 control groups, it was evident how the researcher had to take an extra effort to make the students talk by repeatedly asking questions. Nevertheless, few students stood up and exhibited satisfactory level of engagement. When moving on to the cognitive engagement, the researchers' notes were based on students' thoughtfulness and willingness to work. Given that it was shown how the students showed willingness in practicing the given list of vocabulary and how the game became a motivational factor in doing so. Nevertheless, it was clearly evident how the control groups only followed the provided instructions and considered the classroom environment rather stressful and boring. When moving on to the emotional engagement, the researcher looked at positive or the negative attitude of students towards the classroom environment, where it was clearly exhibited how the experimental groups are better involved in the lesson and they were enthusiastic. Nevertheless, the 2 control groups also showed positive responses to the lesson material and the new teachers. By taking all the findings into consideration, the researcher has come to the following conclusions. Although the scores of all 3 groups have eventually dropped along with the time, there is a significant difference in the scores of the learners in the experimental group which received the game-based approach compared to the 2 control groups. However, it is important to note that while the results did not show a significant impact of the 2 teaching methods at the immediate retention stage, the results of the post-tests at the delayed retention stage show the difference in the impact of the 2 teaching methods while confirming that language games do have an impact in grammar retention. Moreover, the comparison of the 3 test results indicate that the experimental group has exceeded the two control groups with higher mean values during the immediate retention stage and delayed retention stage. These results further reveal that the usage of language games in the ESL classroom lead to effective language acquisition in terms of grammar and retain them in the long term. When taking the researchers' observations into consideration, learners of the experimental group showed greater enthusiasm in the classroom from the very beginning, which was not experienced in the two control groups. The researcher noticed a positive change in the students compared to those of the two control groups which received traditional teaching when the lesson incorporated a game. Further, the students learning in the game-based approach enjoyed the lesson due to its element of fun, which creates a comfortable environment where learning is taken place with less anxiety and least disturbance. The findings further indicated that the willingness of students in grammar learning when they receive hands-on experience. It is clear that the teachers need to put an extra effort to teach grammar to learners, especially those of younger age, since they tend to lose interest easily. Thus, the results of the current study present that when students are provided with an objective, they are motivated to learn effectively by retaining the target language. Therefore, based on the above findings, it can be concluded that while the textbooks assist the learners with the theoretical knowledge, games can be incorporated in order to provide the learners with a positive learning experience, leading to grammar retention in the long term. However, it does not mean that games have to be a part of teaching in every lesson. Instead, it stresses that it is the teacher's responsibility to understand the learner's requirement and address them appropriately. As common to any research, there are a few limitations of these studies as follows. These are my references. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wazir. Again, it's open for Q&A now.
Is the presenter there?
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Because I can't locate her and I sent her a message.
Dell, this computer which says Dell.
Yeah, it's me. It's me. Yeah.
Your Dell. Okay, Shazmin. Yeah. I sent you a message as well.
Okay.
So audience, please go ahead with your questions and comments. Okay, since nobody has so far asked anything.
Can I ask a question?
Okay, yeah. Yes, go ahead. Yes, Wazir.
Okay. No, I should first congratulate the presenter. It's a very detailed study. My question is, when you group the students, how did you group the students? And the second question, right? How were they grouped into these three groups? And also, who were the teachers who taught these three groups? Because that is important, because the teacher factor also plays a role in game-based teaching, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so as I said, because I chose irregular past tense anyway, I purposely chose grade 6. And in the school, there were only three grade 6 classes. So I took all three classes and they were randomly selected as the experimental and the two control groups. As for the teachers, of course, I didn't teach because it would be biased. Then I had one of my colleagues to teach the lesson. For the three groups, and I observed the teaching.
So is it the same teacher who taught all three classes?
Yes.
Right.
Okay, I had a quick question as well, Ms. Wazir, about the novelty factor of this for both the teachers and the students. Now, your study suggests that game-based teaching is effective in creating sort of long-term learning in terms of grammar. But what will happen when this becomes normalized let's say we introduce it systematically and it's done for a long time? Then both the teacher and the student may lose their enthusiasm. Is that something that you consider?
Yeah, that's why I mentioned in the conclusion as well. It does not mean that we have to have or incorporate games in each and every lesson. But whenever you feel that there are tough lessons when you're teaching, especially like something when you're memorizing, students get bored easily. So they tend to lose interest in the classroom. So whenever you are teaching something like that, of course, then you can incorporate games, not for each and every lesson. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, then thank you very much, Ms. Wazir. We'll move on to the next presentation. which is by H.A.R. Aloka, The Effectiveness of Improvisation in Enhancing Speaking Skills and Confidence Building of Young ESL Learners.
Good afternoon. I'm Rajini Alok. Good afternoon. I'm Rajini Aloka. The topic of my study is the effectiveness of improvisation in enhancing speaking skills and confidence building of young ESL learners. Here's the content of my presentation today. Moving on to the introduction, this study investigates the effectiveness of the drama form improvisation in enhancing speaking skills and confidence building of young ESL learners. This study will make a valuable contribution to the ESL field, as Bygate 1987 mentions, teaching and learning of speaking in the ESL context are challenging for both teachers and learners. Also, previous studies have investigated this area in relation to adult ESL learners, but the impact of improvisation on speaking skills of young ESL learners is an unexplored area in the Sri Lankan context. As a result, the study covers a lacuna in the field of ESL in Sri Lanka. Secondly, the importance designated on oral communication competency of English language is high in Sri Lanka as most of the other ESL countries. Therefore, it could be stated that investigating effective methodologies which would develop speaking skills and increase confidence level is a necessity in the field of English language teaching in Sri Lanka. Moreover, the study comprises of ESL learners, young ESL learners who follow the Cambridge Movers Level course. As a result, Movers Level speaking test materials are used in evaluating the impact of speaking skills. Therefore, the study also investigates whether improvisation is an effective methodology to train and practice the young learners who are undertaking Cambridge Young Learners examinations. Therefore, the objective of this study is to evaluate the effectiveness of the drama form improvisation in enhancing speaking skills and the confidence in speaking of young ESL learners. Thus, the final results of this study will provide answers for three questions, such as what is the impact of using improvisation towards English speaking in the ESL classroom? How does the usage of improvisation affect the confidence level of the young learners? What are the challenges faced by the teacher and the learners when using improvisation in an ESL classroom? Moving on to the literature review. First, let's discuss on communicative language teaching. According to Richards and Rogers 2014, communicative teaching approach is generally regarded as an approach rather than a method that aims to make communicative competence the goal of language teaching and develop procedures for the teaching of the four language skills that acknowledge the interdependence of language and communication. Richards 2005 mentions that it reflects how learners learn a language, the roles of the teachers and learners in the classroom, and the classroom activities that help facilitate learning. Moreover, according to Brown 1994, communicative language teaching is seen as an electric blend of the contributions of previous methods into an approach which goes beyond the teaching of rules, patterns, definitions, and other knowledge about language to the teaching of genuine, spontaneous, and meaningful communication. Moving on to the speaking in the ESL context, Noonan 1999 states, success is measured in terms of the ability to carry out a conversation in the target language. Hence, speaking is a crucial part of second language learning and teaching. Thus, the mastery of speaking skills in language has become a priority for many second or foreign language learners. Moreover, Richards 2005 states that language learners often evaluate their success in language learning as well as the effectiveness of their language course on the basis of how well they feel they have improved in their spoken language proficiency. Moreover, Bailey 2003 states in regard to ESL context, unlike reading or writing, speaking happens in real time. Usually the person we are talking to is waiting for us to speak right then. Thus, we cannot edit or revise what we want to say. Language is dynamic. We cannot plan all words and sentences in advance. Hence, it can be stated that speaking happens spontaneously. Moving on to confidence in speaking in the ESL classroom, Noonan 1999 argues that many English learners are reluctant and unmotivated. The reluctance may be due to the cultural factors, linguistic factors, and/or psychological affective factors. Moreover, Gebhardt 2006 states that one of the main problems faced by ESL/EFL teachers is the student will not talk problem. There are different reasons for this situation. According to Goddard 1990, one of the reasons for the learner's minimum participation can be the inability to apply oral communication properly. Gebhardt 2006 further states that some students will not talk because they are too shy or have such high levels of anxiety or speaking. Many studies, including Horwitz 1986, McIntyre and Gardner 1991, Young 1991, Phillips 1993, conducted on anxiety indicate that second or foreign language anxiety can have a negative effect on the language learning process. These studies state that psychological factors such as fear of making mistakes, shyness, anxiety, lack of confidence, and lack of motivation hinder students from speaking in the ESL/EFL classroom. Moving on to improvisation, Richards 2016 defines improvisation as a dramatic hypothetical situation in which two or more speakers interact without any special preparation. As improvisation is interactive and visual, it has the potential of making the learning experience enjoyable for the students. Richards further identifies that when students carry out communicative tasks, such as improvisation, they engage in the process of negotiation of meaning, employing strategies such as comprehension checks, confirmation checks, and clarification requests. Furthermore, Ellis 2003 clarifies that role play or improvisation tasks are examples of unfocused pedagogic tasks, which is a good opportunity for language learning if they are structured well to stimulate learners' participation. Consequently, students will have the chance to use language according to the simulated situation. Thus, evaluating the development of speaking skills of young ESL learners through the drama activity improvisation is the major focus of this study. So moving on to effectiveness of using improvisation, several studies based on the effectiveness of the drama form improvisation in improving the speaking skills of ESL/EFL learners have obtained positive results. Among them is the study done on clowning and improvisation in the ESL classroom, observations and suggestions. This study is particularly significant since the study explores the improvement of young ESL learners, but it's not conducted in Sri Lankan context. Thus, it is vital to explore whether positive results could be gained in the Sri Lankan context as well. Moreover, the study done in Nigeria for adult ESL learners by Arponsas and Adelabu 2013, and also the study done by Fleger and Kovacs 2015. Both these studies have gained positive results, but they are not being conducted in the Sri Lankan context. The study by Kothalawala and Kothalawala 2016 on effectiveness of using improvisation to develop English speaking skills is a study done in the Sri Lankan context, but for adult ESL learners. When considering the above literature reviews, even though there are recognized theoretical aspects regarding the impact of improvisation on the development of speaking skills of ESL learners, the research done on investigating the effectiveness of these theories are relatively infrequent in the Sri Lankan context. As the result of the deficiency in research, the researcher aims at investigating the impact of the drama form improvisation as a method of communicative language teaching and as a facilitator of negotiated interaction on the development of speaking skills of young ESL learners. Moving on to the methodology of the study employed qualitative methods of data collection and analysis. Moreover, the study categorizes as a pre-experimental research study employed with one group pre-test, post-test design. Furthermore, pre-experimental research studies as a qualitative research are dialectic and interpretive. Therefore, the study can be categorized as developmental and dynamic, in which formal structured instruments were not used. First, the 15 young ESL learners and their teacher were interviewed before the intervention, and also the students were tested prior to the intervention, which was audio recorded, and a MOORS level speaking test material was employed for the pre-test. The research was conducted in 5 sessions, a 2-hour session for a week for 5 weeks time period. During the 5 weeks, the sessions were handled by the interviewed Cambridge teacher, while the researcher remained as an observer. At the end of the 5 weeks, a post-test was conducted to examine the potential improvement in the speaking competence of the participants. This was again a Cambridge MOORS level test material. Post-test was also audio recorded so that the results could be compared with the pre-test. On the other hand, post-interview sessions with both the teacher and the students were conducted, and more qualitative analysis was drawn from the researcher's journal, in which the researcher's observations of the 5-week sessions were collected. The study employed thematic analysis procedures in analyzing the collecting data through interviews, the pre or post tests, and the research journal. Therefore, the analysis particularly focuses on examining themes or patterns of meaning within the collected data. By doing so, the researcher aims at exploring the answers for the research questions. Moving on to the findings of this study are presented under 3 sections: the impact of improvisation on speaking skills, factors affecting confidence building, and challenges when using improvisation in the ESL classroom. Moving on to the impact of improvisation on speaking skills, which will provide the answer for the first research question. Given below are the marks received by the participants for the pre-test and the post-test. By comparing the overall marks received by the participants, it can be stated that a significant improvement is visible in each participant's marks. Also, the data in the pre-test and the post-test were observed and analyzed in order to evaluate the improvement in the participants' fluency, accuracy, and vocabulary. So moving on to fluency, in relation to the improvement in fluency, a minor improvement was visible when comparing the pre-test and the post-test. An impact was viewed on the participants' ability to speak about a certain topic in detail. Slight changes were visible in the length of sentences uttered by the participant when comparing the pre-test and the post-test. It could be noted that the participants made an effort to speak in a more descriptive manner in the post-test. Moving on to the improvement in accuracy, one of the significant improvements related to grammar was the proper usage of past tense. It was noted that during the post-test, the students tend to use correct past tenses compared with the pre-test. It was also said by the teacher in the post-interview. Another minor improvement viewed in relation to grammar was the use of conjunctions but and because. During the pre-test, most of the students tend to omit the 2 conjunctions, but in the post-test, most of the students use the 2 conjunctions properly. However, in some instances, the grammar mistakes done in the pre-test were repeated in the post-test. One notable incident was the usage of article the in front of the proper nouns by one of the participants. When considering the improvement in vocabulary of the participants, a major improvement is not clearly visible. However, all the participants who were unable to complete a sentence due to the lack of vocabulary terms showed an improvement in vocabulary during the post-test. Moving on to the second theme, factors affecting the confidence building, which would provide the answer for the second research question. It was identified that improvisational techniques could impact the development of speaking skills of the participants and their performance in overcoming language anxiety, resulting in more self-confidence. As Brown 1994 explained, the communicative purpose of language compels us to create opportunities for genuine interaction in the classroom. Furthermore, cooperative learning environment, non-threatening environment, and situational authenticity were identified as the major factors affected the confidence building. Moving on to the final theme, challenges when using improvisation in the ESL classroom, which will provide the answers for the third research question. It has been demonstrated through the study that the use of improvisation in the ESL classroom offers new dimensions of learning for the students. However, there are a number of challenges that both teachers and students may face when this active, collaborative, and essentially dialogic method is being introduced in a classroom. Even though during the first 2 weeks some students showed shyness towards participating in improvisation, after the first 2 weeks as established through the data, students demonstrated a high level of interest in contributing to conversation and exhibited a significant progress. Yet the teacher encountered constant challenges in the negotiation of classroom organization, teacher-student and student-student relationships. From the teacher's perspective, it required thorough preparation before, careful observation in class, and careful evaluation afterwards. First, using improvisation was a time-consuming task in teacher preparation and classroom organization. The classroom arrangements for improvisation sessions was challenging for teacher as well. Understanding the role of the teacher was another challenge for the teacher when using improvisation in the classroom. Moving on to the conclusion of the study, to summarize, improvisation technique could play a significant role in teaching speaking of young learners in the ESL context. It is an appealing device to enrich teachers' and students' experience to process English acquisition together. For young learners, improvisation could improve their fluency, communicative competence, as well as their confidence. For teachers, it could be a challenging but effective strategy which could facilitate students to become more initiative learners in the ESL classes. Moving on to the recommendations, through the findings of the study, improvisation can be recommended for the improvement of speaking skills of young ESL learners and practice situational authenticity in speaking. Moreover, it can be recommended for the teachers of Cambridge Young Learners English courses as an effective means of practicing speaking skills in the classroom. Furthermore, improvisation can be recommended for the young learners with language anxiety to overcome their fears through cooperative learning. Thus, improvisation can be recommended for young ESL learners as an effective means of improving speaking skills as well as confidence building. Here are the references of the study. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Ms. Aloka. The presentation is open for Q&A now. Does anyone have a question regarding the use of improvisation in relation to young learners? Okay, no one seems to have a question regarding the presentation. This is not an area that I'm very familiar with also, so I won't ask a question. So Aloka, thank you very much for your presentation. We will move on to the next presentation then, which is by Ms. Nuzla Nawaz, and it's on perspectives and attitudes of Sri Lankan English teachers towards discussing controversial social issues in the classroom.
I'm Nuzla Nawaz, currently working at a leading international school and an MA student of the Postgraduate Institute of Sri Lanka. My MA's thesis is on perspectives and attitudes of Sri Lankan English teachers towards discussing the controversial social issues in the classroom. My study has attempted to identify topics which could be deemed as controversial social topics in the Sri Lankan context today, while trying to discover whether the English language classroom could be used as a suitable platform to discuss such topics through the use of literary texts. I was stimulated to conduct this research as a result of a need to find answers to a specific situation in my daily teaching life while discussing the novel Goodnight, Mr. Tom by Michelle Magorian. This novel would be referred to as GMT here onwards. This is used in the grade 9 language classroom as a tool in order to promote more interest in the students for the subject English literature in the target school I was teaching at that time. While working in the capacity of an English language and literature teacher in the target school, I suddenly realized that the English teachers of the parallel grade 9 classes did not always discuss the topic of child abuse when exploring this specific text. Thus, I was inspired to investigate this phenomenon as child abuse in terms of physical, verbal, and emotional abuse was a subtle yet prominent topic embedded within the novel. Looking at research objectives, this study was crafted with the following objectives: to understand what types of topics are perceived as sensitive or controversial social issues by the target group and their teaching contexts, as well as the reasons for such views. 2. To understand how such topics are handled by Sri Lankan English language teachers when encountered in the literary text being taught in class. To discover what influences teachers to make certain classroom decisions. To identify possible teaching strategies which are adopted or could be employed to address varied receptions teachers may experience in their teaching contexts. Looking at the research questions, my research questions were: what is understood as sensitive or controversial social issues by the teacher participants and their teaching contexts? What are teacher participants' perspectives about exploring such topics within GMT in the classroom? What kinds of classroom decisions are made by the teacher participants in such situations? Looking at the methodology, this master's research adopts a qualitative research paradigm. A narrative inquiry approach was employed. Multiple research methods have been used, such as teacher participants' background profile questionnaires, narrative inquiries in the form of semi-structured interviews with the teacher participants, participatory workshops for teachers, ongoing journal notes of the researcher, analysis of the primary text, which is the novel Goodnight, Mr. Tom, as well as the secondary literature review done by the researcher. The chosen sample is a purposive and convenience sample. This consisted of 3 female English teachers of grade 9 from a boys' school and 3 female English teachers of the same grade from the target girls' school. It is important to note that all the teachers are homogeneous only in terms of gender. Data analysis follows the qualitative research tradition. Initially, although I planned to use a focus group discussion as my second data generation tool, which I thought would create a space for the target group teachers to exchange their ideas and methods of discussing controversial social topics in the classroom, the generated data through the interviews made it very clear that while all the teachers thought it was important to discuss such topics in the classroom, teachers seemed to make various teaching decisions while teaching and ended up not discussing them, thereby leaving such topics unexplored. As a result, at this point of my research, with the guidance of my supervisor, Professor Maitri Vikramasinghe, I decided to think out of the box. Although this took quite a lot of time, I was able to design a half-a-day workshop for teachers of English as well as English literature, using a model of the Professional Development Pact for the effective teaching of controversial issues funded and implemented by the Council of Europe, and tune it to cater to the needs of my study, which included a range of activities for teachers to engage in, which provided them with ideas to use in their classrooms when discussing controversial social topics. Furthermore, I used this opportunity to provide information to my fellow practitioners about possible avenues they could explore if they come across sensitive situations, to create awareness among their students. All the teachers recognized the importance of discussing socially controversial topics, or topics which may be sensitive depending on the teaching context, in order to create awareness among students, to create a safe environment, or to even use as a tool for positive reinforcement, through using Mr. Tom as a positive example in a world of negativity, as in the case of a classroom in which the teacher was aware of having a student who was undergoing similar experiences as the protagonist of the novel, physical abuse. When looking closely at the narratives, the teachers identified topics such as child abuse, sexual abuse, bullying, adultery, divorce, sex, and homosexuality as topics which are sensitive or sometimes socially controversial due to the emotionally charged reactions projected by the audience during the discussion of such topics. However, it was highlighted that the reactions of the students totally dependent on how the teacher approached them, and also that these topics cannot be identified as taboo anymore as a result of the fact that the current student population being exposed to a range of topics which makes them quite expressive during classroom discussions. When looking at the novel GMT, the sensitive topics which were highlighted were when the readers are made aware of the fact that Willie is physically abused by his own mother. Secondly, when the baby making process is explained by Zack, breaking down the religious beliefs of Willie at that point of the story. And finally, the death of Zack. All the teachers emphasized that the element of physical abuse in the novel becomes socially controversial only because due to the mother abusing her own child. Therefore, the stereotype of a mother figure was explored through this. Furthermore, during the discussion of the baby-making process in the novel, it is evident that the teachers of the boys' school had summarized the chapter rather than read through like the other times based on their previous experiences of teaching the same set of students, assuming that they would either create an unnecessary disturbance or make irrelevant comments which would make the teachers uncomfortable. On the other hand, teachers of the girls' school had felt quite comfortable to talk about these topics, which clearly highlights the comment of one teacher who happened to be a former teacher of this same boys' school and a current teacher of the girls' school, who stated that she is comfortable to discuss such topics with female students rather than with male students. Teaching decisions made by the target teachers obviously were influenced by many things, such as personal experiences, emotions, preconceived notions about the reactions of the students, gender of the students, as well as the gender of the children of the teachers as well. So the teachers of the boys' school, then looking at the teachers of the girls' school, had different opinions about teaching controversial social topics. They mentioned the discipline of the students, time limitations, disinterest of students in the classroom, and having mixed ability student groups in terms of language proficiency and the high number of students, and also personal inhibitions as well as negative opinions of other teachers regarding specific student groups influence them in making certain teaching decisions in the classroom. Some teachers actually mention that age appropriate topics should be discussed and certain boundaries should not be crossed, while some of the teachers mention that authentic information should be provided to these children. Therefore, they will not believe in false information they might get to know through other sources. It is also it was also actually highlighted by a few teachers that teachers need to build a rapport with students in order to create a platform to discuss such topics so that there will be an active discussion during the class rather than having passive listeners. One particular teacher mentioned that a professional in this field should handle such topics rather than expecting English teachers to handle controversial social topics during the English lesson. In this it is quite apparent that a wide range of topics could be discussed in Sri Lankan classrooms if the teachers approach them equipped with the knowledge to handle such topics. Thus, this knowledge gap needs to be filled. When exploring the benefit-risk dilemma experienced by the teacher participants in their teaching context when dealing with such topics, it is quite clear that their teaching decisions are influenced by factors pertaining to internal as external factors. Thus, this research has shed light on the fact that Sri Lankan English teachers need to be better equipped with the knowledge necessary to handle controversial social topics they may come across in discussions in the classroom. To do this, it is important for teachers to recognize this need and engage in teacher collaboration and self-development. Furthermore, I have come to realize that getting my ideas across to other practitioners is more important than ever before. When looking at the statistics provided by the UNICEF and the National Child Protection Agency, who report there has been a dramatic rise in the proportion of child cruelty cases reported to the 1929 Child Helpline since the start of Sri Lanka's COVID-19 curfew. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nuzla, for that fascinating study into teaching controversial topics in the English classroom. So Q&A time. Does anybody have any queries, questions, comments?
Hi there, sir. May I ask a
Yes,
question?
yes, please go ahead.
Hi, Ms. Nusla. It was a lovely presentation. I was very fascinated with that. Just a small clarification is when you were conducting this study, but by any point, did the institutions, policies, or the parents' notions actually curb the teachers in reflecting taboo or let's say more sensitive topics at any point? Did they ever bring that out as a hindrance to the discussions? Miss Lusla, I think you need to unmute
Nuzla,
yourself.
your mic is off. Mic is off. Okay.
Sorry. Karanya, are you talking about the fact whether I focused on the students, is it?
Yeah, I mean the institution and the parents and the students, did they reflect any resistance at any point?
No, the reality is actually this is a limitation of my study because at the point where I was working at this specific target boys school, I had access to actually my initial plan was to do teacher classroom observations. But due to personal reasons, because I decided to leave the place where I was working, I was denied access to classroom observations. So I decided to move into only doing narrative inquiry at that stage because I did not have access to talking to the children and talking about how they felt about discussing controversial topics in the classroom. So this focus is only about teachers and how they think about teaching such topics in the classroom. And as my title very clearly says, it's about perspectives and their attitudes. And in my research, I also unpack the title in terms of the words perspectives and attitudes, because I'm talking about, taking in theoretical frameworks to unpack the titles, keywords, which are perspectives and attitudes. For example, if I take the word perspectives, I'm taking this Jack Mazzero's transformation theory, which talks about the fact that perspective, according to the transformation theory, means the structure of cultural and psychological assumptions within which an individual's past experiences affect what happens in current experiences of a person. So that is exactly why I decided that I need to actually get a I need to do a background profile questionnaire of the teachers in order to find out what kind of experiences they have had before. And instead of actually doing a close-ended questionnaire, decided to do a narrative inquiry. Therefore, they could actually narrate in the form of a narration. They could tell me about their experiences and think about what made them decide to sometimes discuss these topics and what kind of feelings they had during at a certain moment, which kind of actually revealed that, as I have already pointed out in my findings, that some teachers said that they felt uncomfortable because they have already taught these particular students, because in those classes, some teachers teach not only English, but they also teach history. The same teacher teaches another subject as well. So as a result of it, they are influenced by the behavior of the students when they teach particular subjects. So they have made certain teaching decisions based on their experiences of the students.
I think,
That's
Nuzla, you
thanks
have
a lot.
responded quite comprehensively to Tarunya's question. Any other queries or questions? Okay, if not, we will move on to the next session. Thank you very much, Nuzla, for your presentation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the opportunity.
So the next presenter is SMTI Padania. The impact of drama and theatre games on developing the oral proficiency of English as a second language learners in Sri Lanka.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tusi Padhani, an instructor at Department of English and Modern Languages, Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, Sri Lanka International Buddhist Academy, Palikale. Currently, I'm reading for the Master of Arts in Linguistics at University of California and MA in TLSC at Open University, Nambala. In the year 2019, I coordinated an inter-school drama competition for the schools in Central Province at Siva Campus, Palikale, in collaboration with Northern Kentucky University School of Theatre and Performance Art, America, which led me to the idea of conducting this research. So, the title of my research publication is The Impact of Drama and Theatre Games on Developing the Oral Proficiency of English as a Second Language Learners in Sri Lanka. So this is my presentation outline. First, I'll give an introduction to the research. Then I'll be looking at the objectives. Next, I'll be looking at the methodology. After, I'll be looking at the results and discussion. Finally, I'll give a conclusion and recommendations. And there are references attached at the end of the presentation as well. Moving on to the introduction, even after years of English language instruction, many Sri Lankan students find it challenging to communicate in English. As a typical English language class does not provide many opportunities for English as a second language learners to use the English language or oral communication or to develop articulateness in it, teachers need to give students the opportunity to use the second language inside the classroom. As the use of traditional teaching or learning methods cannot create enough motivation and interest in ESL learners, teachers need to implement new strategies to teach second language in an active and interesting manner. Let's look at some relevant citations. In the year 2012, Larson Freeman, in his book An Introduction to Second Language Acquisition Research, emphasizes that implementing CLT is the ultimate goal of enhancing the speaking skills of students. In the year 1991, Holden, in her book Drama in Language Teaching, states that drama offers opportunities for learners to use their imagination and memory to express themselves through verbal expressions and gestures. In the year 1989, Oxford and Crookall, in a journal article on research on language learning strategies, states that role-playing and drama help students improve their oral language expertise in the target language and offers opportunities for students to respond to the types of linguistic behavioral patterns that they have to encounter outside the classroom. In the year 2013, Richard Clark, in a journal article on drama techniques in teaching, explains theatre games as an ideal strategy for language acquisition as they enable both learners with or without language learning difficulties to overcome their struggles in language acquisition. So this study focuses on the impact of drama and theatre games on developing the oral proficiency of ESL learners in Sri Lanka. Objective. The objective of the study is to investigate the impact of drama and theatre games on developing the oral proficiency of ESL learners in Sri Lanka. Two research hypotheses have been tested. Zero hypothesis. There is no impact of drama and theatre games on developing the oral proficiency of ESL learners in Sri Lanka. Alternative hypothesis. There is an impact of drama and theatre games on developing the oral proficiency of ESL learners in Sri Lanka. Moving on to the methodology, the study was designed using quantitative research methods. Data were collected via a pretest, a study program, post-test, and researchers' observation. To test the research hypothesis, the same level of after A-level diploma in English students at Siva campus Pallekele was selected as an experimental group and a control group. These two groups consisted of 34 randomly selected students, 17 from each group. Talking about the primary data collection procedure, in order to determine their passive knowledge of English language, a pretest was given to both experimental and control group prior to the treatment. As for the procedure, the teacher introduced a scenario to each pair. As an example, two friends find a buried treasure, and then asked them to create and perform an impromptu drama on the given scenario by taking the roles of the given characters. Each pair was given 5 to 10 minutes to rehearse before presenting the act to the class. They had to use dialogues, body language, facial expressions, and gestures to enact the scenario they were given. Afterwards, each pair was commented by the researcher at the end of their performance. Moving on to the researcher's observation and evaluation, the learners' performances were observed and scored to check their fluency in the second language by using a self-made rubric scale which was adapted and developed from the website www.ourcampus.com. Recorded performances were kept to evaluate by comparing them with the post-test results. So this is the rubric scale used by the researcher at both the pre-test and the post-test. As you can see, 5 skills as pronunciation and fluency, tone and intonation, acting and originality, movement, and character have been used to evaluate the oral proficiency of the students, and they were scored out of 20 marks, maximum 4 marks for each skill. So as we have a very limited time, I'm not going to explain this rubric scale further. Moving on to the treatment or the study program, the drama and theatre games oriented ESL lessons were implemented in 52 sessions from Monday to Wednesday, 2 hours per day, 3 sessions per week for 4 consecutive months. In each session, the experimental group studied the English language through drama and theatre games, whereas the control group studied it following conventional methods. So this is a sample lesson plan used at the teaching program. For both the groups, the lesson present continuous tense has been used and the duration of the lesson was 120 minutes. For the both groups, the lesson was first introduced via a PowerPoint presentation which explains the present continuous tense formula and the use of it. For the experimental group, the lesson was taught using icebreaker games, role play, improvisation, teachers' feedbacks, activities in the course book, question and answer session with the teacher's summary of the lesson, and finally the feedbacks. For the control group, the lesson was taught by students making sentences orally, doing activities in the course book, correcting books by the teacher, a speech task on describing what is happening in a given picture, a given scenario, or at the moment, and lesson summary, and finally the feedbacks. So the experimental group teachings were learner-centered, whereas the control group teachings were teacher-centered. Let's now move on to the results and discussion. Talking about the analysis of the pretest and the post-test, you can see that in this tables that each group's pretest results were compared with their post-test results, and each test was scored out of 20 marks. Let me now explain the comparison of the pretest and the post-test results of experimental and control group. At the pretest, it was found that the minimum score both experimental and control group could obtain was 6. The maximum score of the experimental group was 14, whereas the control group was 13 out of 20. At the post-test, experimental group's minimum score was increased by 8 and maximum score was increased by 6 marks, while control group's minimum score was increased by 6 and maximum score was increased by 4 marks. Let's now look at the total comparison in another chart to have a clearer idea. As you can see, considering the post-test results, the scores of the experimental group were found to be significantly higher than the control groups, as mode of the experimental group is 18, whereas the mode of the control group is 14. The both groups have gained a higher average point at the post-test than at the pre-test. Comparing the data obtained, it is a significant positive improvement of the average points of the experimental group compared to the control group, whereas 8.94 is greater than 5.6. The findings reveal that drama and theatre games oriented ESL lessons have offered participants the ability to create certain everyday interactions. Participants became interested in learning and playing various roles in a real-life setting that they might experience in the future. In fact, participants benefited from the nature of the scenario they come up with, gained practice to face the real-life situations by using the language terms in the second language. Though the learners were shy and used limited language at the pre-test, the researcher could observe that drama and theatre games created a comfortable atmosphere and modified the normal traditional style of learning and teaching, as the learners from the experimental group were much more comfortable at the post-test. They used a developed vocabulary, language terms, and gestures to express themselves at the post-test. Moving on to the conclusion, based on the results, it can be concluded that teaching second language through drama and theatre games would be a promising CLT strategy, as it offers language acquisition, encourages ESL learners to utilize their target language through enacting the real-life scenarios, and thereby improve their oral proficiency. Through drama and theatre games-oriented second language learning, the monotony of a conventional classroom and language lessons can be broken and facilitates ESL learners to handle real-life situations as competent English language speakers. Considering the discussed results, the alternative hypothesis is accepted, as drama and theatre games-oriented ESL lessons do have an impact on developing Sri Lankan ESL learners' English oral proficiency. As for the recommendations, considering the existing state of poor oral communication skills of ESL learners, it can be recommended that the English teachers need to find forms and instruments to support their students develop their English language oral proficiency. ESL teachers can conveniently utilize different instructional methods like drama and theatre games where students can discover actual language experiences from actual persons outside of the language classroom. In the Sri Lankan context, it is important that authentic materials are used as majority of students have limited opportunities to practice the target language outside the classroom. Moreover, implementing drama and theatre games on teaching English language as a second language focused workshops should be held in Sri Lankan school context. Finally, the English textbooks used in Sri Lankan schools should be revised as they depend on grammar, reading and writing skills and not so much speaking skills. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, I
Thank
would
you
be
very
happy.
much, Ms. So the session is open for Q&A. Does anybody have a comment or a question? Okay, I guess nobody seems to have a question. Then we can move on. Thank you very much, Ms. Padania, for your presentation on the use of drama in the English language classroom. So we will move on to the penultimate presentation, which is silence in the ESL classroom. What is the role of teacher positioning of learners? A qualitative case study of Buddhist monks' lack of interaction in an undergraduate ESL classroom in Sri Lanka. And this is by Ms. I. Atukora.
Silence in the ESL classroom. What's the role of teacher positioning of learners? This is a qualitative case study conducted on Buddhist monks' lack of interaction in an undergraduate ESL classroom in Sri Lanka. First, let us look at the background to the study. Despite the importance assigned to interaction in learning a second language, it has been observed that many students remain unresponsive and passive in their ESL classrooms. To date, many studies have been conducted with different perspectives to explore the actual reasons behind students' silence. However, the most common and probably the easiest way the teacher seems to be explaining this phenomenon is by labeling their learners stereotypically, by just simply looking at the usual role the learners take up in the classroom. Many teachers tend to interpret their learners' silence as lack of cooperation and intrinsic motivation, poor proficiency in the target language, learners' laziness and lack of commitment. However, it should be noted that these explanations seem simplistic, biased, and stereotypical and do not give an insight into the many underlying factors which result in passivity among students. The present study, however, takes a different approach to examining this problem. In this study, it is assumed that studying the teacher's role in students' interactional behavior is important, as teachers generally determine when, how, why, where and with whom the classroom interaction should occur. Therefore, the study intends to explore the learner's level of participation in whole class discussions in the light of the teacher's positioning of learners. So, these are the research questions. How does the teacher position her or his learners in the ESL classroom? How does the teacher's positioning of learners affect the learner's level of participation in whole class interactions? Now let's look at what positioning is. According to Harrer and Van Langen Ho, 1999, positioning can be defined as an act in which interlocutors assign or are assigned particular positions within a conversation, that is, a joint action by conversation participants to locate each other in a particular storyline. These positions are relative, dynamic, fluid, and local. Positioning can occur in all forms of conversations irrespective of the place, time, and people engaged in it. and interactions that take place inside classrooms are of no exception. Teacher positioning of learners. This can be identified as teachers assigning the learners with particular rights, duties, and obligations in their conversations with the learners. The importance of teacher positioning. A teacher's positioning of learners can be understood as a teacher assigning a temporary role to a learner or learners at a particular moment of her or his interaction with them, which will give rights to perform certain acts while denying access to perform other actions. Given that a person carries expectations and constraints as well as responsibilities and rights, the positions the teacher assigns their learners may encourage further interaction or delimit what the student can say or do at a particular moment of interaction. The present study was conducted in a mixed ability ESL classroom of 51 students in the Department of English Language Teaching in a well-known state university in Sri Lanka. The program is offered as a compulsory credit-bearing course of 2 hours on each working day for 2 consecutive semesters. The class was taught by 2 ESL teachers, Mr. Dhanapala and Ms. Kavita. Both are pseudonyms. These are their profiles. After 2 weeks of observation, the 2 Buddhist monks of the class, Reverend Soratha and Reverend Rahula, who were noticeably silent in whole class discussions, were selected for close examination. The focal students stood out among the others because they belonged to the minority in the class. They were mostly positioned by the teachers in comparison to the lay students. The study employed the qualitative case study method. In order to conduct an in-depth analysis of the positions, the focal students were ascribed by their 2 teachers and their possible impact on these students' engagement in whole class interactions. The focal students were observed with each teacher 6 times during the sessions of 2 hours, and the class was observed 12 times for a total number of 24 hours. A variety of qualitative data collection tools were employed to validate the researchers' interpretations of classroom incidents. The study utilized the constant comparative method and Strauss and Corbin's coding strategies to analyze data. The constant comparative method was particularly helpful to identify general patterns, similarities, and differences in the way teachers position their learners. Results and discussion. The analysis of data yielded 2 main findings. First, it confirmed that the 2 Buddhist monks' engagement in classroom discussions was poor. In fact, the Buddhist monks never volunteered to comment when the class discussions were open. Second, the findings showed that Reverend Rahula and Reverend Soratha were both socially and categorically positioned as clergy by the 2 teachers rather than being positioned as 2 individual learners of their own right. Interestingly, none of the teachers knew the name of the Buddhist monks and just used the term reverend to address them both. Given below are some instances where the teachers socially positioned the 2 Buddhist monks as clergy. For example, in her interview, Ms. Kavita shared an incident where the Buddhist monks had lied to the teacher. In this instance, by drawing the attention of other students to the Buddhist monks, she positioned herself and the rest of the learners as lay people and reminded the Reverend that he should be on guard when the lay people are around. The last example is an occasion where Mr. Dhanapala also interactively positioned the 2 Buddhist monks as Buddhist clergy. However, both teachers seems to be unaware of the fact that the Buddhist monks wish to be treated as ordinary students in the ESL classroom. Reverend Soratha once mentioned in his interview that he preferred to be treated like an ordinary student. Instead, it was observed that the teachers continuously positioned them as clergy, which may indirectly have led the Buddhist monks to be othered in class. Yun 2008 stresses that, quote, the main reason for students' anxiety, silence, and different positioning has much to do with being outsiders in the regular classroom context, and the students' affective filter increases when they are positioned as outsiders, which inhibits their participation in learning. Unquote. Moreover, it seems that due to their social positioning as Buddhist clergy, It is difficult for these monks to claim spaces in conversations. Reverend Soratha revealed that he loved telling jokes and being funny. However, he was not able to exercise his desire and be himself due to his self and social positioning as a monk. Furthermore, the teacher's strong social positioning of them as clergy restricted them from participating in certain classroom discourses to which the other students had access. Therefore, teachers' positioning of the Buddhist monks as clergy can limit the opportunities to speak their minds and gain symbolic capital by constructing and reconstructing their positional identities as active learners. In conclusion, Reverend Rahul and Reverend Soratha were often positioned as clergy by the two teachers, and there were instances where particular teachers prevented the Buddhist monks from being vocal and engage in productive interactions by indexing these learners' social positioning. These occasions can be considered to be instances where the teachers perpetuated prevalent societal images of Buddhist monks. In fact, these positions did not encourage the two reverends to take part in class discussions as ordinary learners. Finally, with reference to the two selected cases, the findings of the study are in agreement with Yamakawa, Harklow, and Yun, who postulated that learners' interaction is largely influenced by the ways they are positioned, in which teachers also play a significant role. Recommendations. First, in order to create an effective language classroom where students have equal access to learning opportunities, the learner should not be assigned solid social positions. Instead, they should be given an opportunity to move freely in and out of their positions. The study also encouraged teachers to be reflective practitioners, so they are conscious of their interactive positionings of the learners and their possible consequences. My references. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ishani, for that very fascinating and insightful study in an area that is very rarely studied, and I think there are lots of insights in that study. Any questions, comments?
I'd just like to congratulate Ishani. That was a superb presentation. Did very well. And I hope more people will get to hear your insights, because this is, I've seen that more and more, that people fall into the lazy category of saying, oh, they are scared that they're going to be laughed at. But it may be something much more than that when it comes to silence in the classroom. And your study is really eye-opening. I hope more people to get to hear about it in time to come.
Thank you, madam.
Any questions or comments?
Actually, I have a comment.
Please go ahead.
I think that's a very important point, because once I have the same experience with some monks, what they think is they think that they are there to do this religious things, not the things inside the class. So they are most of the time silent, but at the breaks they are so active with others. I think Ishani, you have noticed that, isn't it? During the breaks, I mean the class breaks, they are active, but in the class, they are silent and passive.
Yes, I have also noticed that they are very active. Outside the classroom with other students, they are very comfortable being with them. But once they come to the classroom, so they are ascribed the positions of the Buddhist monks, and at the same time they take the self-positioning of the Buddhist monks as well. So I think because of that reason, they become silent in the classrooms.
Yeah, I think that's what you presented, that the teacher positioning the state of that monk to some higher scale, so they tend to be silent. That's a wonderful
Yes.
study, and I'm happy to hear about that. And it's better you continue it and further and go on the paper.
Okay, thank you very much, Ishani, and I also echo the congratulations of everybody. I think, as I mentioned, it's a very insightful study, and there's actually potential for you to expand this from say, actually looking at, because monks are present a lot in higher education institutions, and I think there's very little research done into their sort of socialization and sort of the social dynamics informing them. I can already see some implications that go beyond the classroom. So congratulations and continue with the good work.
Thank you, sir.
I just want to check whether our last presenter is here, RP Dharmavardhana. Is RP Dharmavardhana present?
I don't think she's joining us.
Okay, in that case, we can conclude the session. And I will also congratulate all the participants for some fascinating research, some insightful research that was shared, and also to the OURS technical team for a very, very smooth experience. I mean, we had a few hiccups, but we are all new to this. I think it worked very well. So congratulations to the entire team, and also to the audience who stayed with us quite faithfully. So we started with like 24 and we're ending with 15, which is pretty good. So thank you very much. So we can end the session.